What's up, it's Jim from On Point Samples. Welcome to this third video in the lead series. This one, we're gonna make a layer from scratch. I'll explain every lead I'm adding in there and why you should be using those if you're trying to achieve a certain sound. And I'm going to show you the processing that results in a very fat mix. So after this video, you'll know everything you need to know to make these really good, clean, professional layers. And I see a lot of people struggling with this, so I really hope you guys enjoy this. Watch episode 1 and 2 to really understand why I'm doing these leads. I'm not gonna explain those leads in detail because we already had videos on that, so just watch those. I'm going to use a melody from our free melody pack that you can download below alongside thousands of other samples for free, and don't miss out on it. It sounds like this. Let's start with loading in the lead. Before I start, let me make my preset mono, a little bit of gliding, add the 24 up and down, and I'm going to add the metadata because I want to stay consistent with every preset we make. The first thing you want to focus on is the octave of the lead and the melody. In this case, this G is too low, this is perfect, and this is way too high. So the main lead is going to play around in this octave range. Let's say your melody, you created it and you made it in D, and you're not comfortable with this position because this might be too low and this might be too high. Feel free to transpose this whole thing to A, for example, like this, and then transpose the whole song to A. It's very important that your song sounds good, right? If you have a melody that ranges a lot of octaves, you want to have it sound good. What I'm trying to say is the power of your melody also really depends on the range you're in. If your melody is too high, it doesn't matter what you add, it's still going to sound a little bit cracky. It's gonna be weird. So let's keep it in G. Before I do anything with making layers, I'm going to create a basic preset because I want this effect built in. So what I'm going to do is make sure we can go from a pluck to a lead. So every basic preset will have that cutoff thingy. And if we duplicate it, it's going to result in every preset having the same lead to pluck or pluck to lead automation. And if you don't understand what I mean, you'll hear it in a second. So open up the filter, assign every oscillator. Even though we didn't use them, we just want it in here. MG low 12 is fine. Take this down to 80 Hertz and we're going to assign envelope 2 like this. Take it down a bit. We can tweak it later. Add it to the cutoff and not all the way. You can hear it's a pluck. And you can tweak it. Macro 1 is going to go to the cutoff around this range. And now we open it up. Perfect. You need to make sure that at 100%, like at 80%, it's still a little bit of a pluck and not fully a lead. That's going to happen if you get this range to 100, you know. Around this range, it's already a lead because this is open up too much. That's why I keep it around this range. So that you have a smooth transition. This comes down to your preference if you want it very tight. Or opened up like this, a little bit of resonance, is whatever you want. I think this is perfect. So this is going to be the cutoff. But then again, if we open it up all the way, you might think you have a lead, but see what happens at this range, right? You can see when it plays, it kind of cuts the highs a little bit. We don't want that. We want our leads to be fully present. So what I'm going to do is assign this one to the mix as well. And then during, right now it's working. And right now it's not working because the mix is down. So whenever I'm automating the cutoff, I want to also automate this so that it's open. And when it's not working, I want it disabled because I want the full lead to shine. So that's kind of like cutoff mix. We'll use this later and you'll see why it's important. Now we made a very nice setup and we can start with this. Let's clone this instance so we can work with it. Here comes the layer part. The first lead I always include, and I don't give a shit what you're making, hardstyle, rawstyle, hardcore. I always want a very just detuned lead with a lot of detune and a lot of voices and a lot of, like, it covers a lot of stuff. It doesn't need to have any character. It's just there to fill up the sound. Also, you need to have a computer with a lot of, it needs to be a pretty solid computer to do this full layer. The more you can process, the better your sound will be. If you can't handle this in terms of CPU, what you could do is determine that this is your final melody and then just make one instance, export this one, drag it into your project, make the next one, export it as well, because having all these instances of Serum is going to cause a lot of CPU usage. If you just use WAV files, it's going to be much better. It's just, it leaves you with a little bit less freedom because you can't tweak the layer anymore. We have this sound because I opened up 16 voices, 16 here. I detuned it and I detuned B a little bit more and I put it 1 octave up so that we also hit that higher octave. And now we have a very spread out sound. And we can get into the plucks. Cool. First lead, nothing much going on. For the second lead, what I'm going to do in this one is just assign the same melody. I'm not going to combine this together. That's something I never really do. I don't go and have the first lead and then add another lead and then watch how they sound together. What I'd rather do is just focus on one lead first, like I'm doing here. And in this one, we're going to create another like very wide lead, I guess. It's just going to be A and B again, 1 octave up like this. And it's just going to be less detuned. So together. You can hear that it really already makes it a lot different. What I see a lot of people do is focus on all these aspects like what do I have in the lower and the high part and I need to have this lead and this lead. What I've experienced is that a lot of this is just cram it together, just see how it sounds. As long as the processing is right, it's going to sound pretty good. The more instance you have, the better. But you know, I don't want you to have too much CPU issues, so we're going to stick to the most important leads first. Very detuned one with 0 and +1 and a less detuned one, 0 +1. The third thing I'm going to make is a more characterized lead. So this lead will be a little bit more a lead with character. And as I've shown in previous videos, there's different types of leads you can make. So for example, you could make a very classic hardstyle lead. But you can also make a very raw lead if you distort something like this with 0 square and put a filter in front. And you can already hear there's so many options you can go for. This is one, the other one that I showed is one, and you can also make a square type lead if you take basic shapes with a square. And we can add LFO1 to the fine tune. So let's maybe just go with a square lead because it's a very classic one. What I did here is add a little bit of FM from the noise, so we get that classic randomized thing on the pitch. I added a little bit of movement to the fine tune. And what I like in these kind of leads is if it has a bit of attack. So let's take LFO2, envelope, BPM, so that's fast rate. We're going to add this LFO2 to the master tune so we get that pitch up effect. Again, 19 is an octave in serum, so let's go 1 octave up. You hear the difference? So I guess we got our third lead, and let's see how it sounds together. And what I've noticed is that it really helps in these kind of layers. It helps to have a lead that isn't detuned. And in this case, we're going to go with our saw lead like this, or our square lead. But what you can also use instead of the square lead is a saw lead. So obviously select the saw like this, and maybe you don't need the FM from the noise. This would be fine as well. You don't have to have this. I guess that's the third thing, right? Just to give a recap, we added a really detuned lead. Another one that's kind of detuned. It doesn't have character. So this one, you know, detuned without character lead. It's the second lead. And then the third type of lead is just a very straightforward saw with just a little bit of movement like this. You want to add this because it adds a lot of nice clarity and punch through in the whole layer. So that's why I kind of like to include a saw lead that's just slightly distorted maybe. Like this. And it doesn't have detune on the left and the right because that adds phasing and that's cool, but I want a very straightforward lead. So this is our fourth one. So for the fourth lead, I kind of want to include a Rawstyle lead just to show you that it's cool to have some Rawstyle sounds going on. So the first thing for this Rawstyle lead is just going to be add a lot of distortion. Let's try diode 2. Let's also get a filter because we already used this filter for the pluck. Actually, let me show you something. This filter needs to be a pre-filter, and this is why. If we add a lot of distortion like this, and we try to go into a pluck now, nothing really happens because it has so much distortion that it kind of distorts the pluck back into a lead. You want a pluck filter after the distortion. So in this case, this is going to be our pluck. Simply get MG low 12 and just replicate the settings that we have right here. Take the cutoff knob, just take envelope 2, sorry, add that here and get the cutoff knob going on top of that as well. And this is going to affect the mix again. Then we're just removing that right here and right here. So now we remove the filter. It doesn't matter how much we distort it because the cutoff is going to go after the distortion. Now we can use our pre-filter and we're going to use this as a bandpass. So let's find band 24. And I want this to move around. So LFO 1 BPM, so it's a bit random. Adding it to the cutoff. Now I want to play around with the unison a bit because if you put it on 1, 2, or 3, alongside this distortion, you get very cool effects. Let's take down the blend. It's not really detuned, but it adds that layer on the left and right and on the stereo. What I also want to add is maybe oscillator B. And because this is also kind of a character lead, we're going to FM from B and see if we get some sweet spots. Might be too harsh, but we'll see later when we're trying to actually process everything. What I want to add is a little bit of hyper dimension, the hyper detune, after the distortion. So it's a little bit less harsh. We have our leads right here. Let's see how it sounds. I guess we can make one more lead, and what I'm trying to do with this one is make it very detuned sound, but not too much. So let's see, 16, 16, 1 octave up. We're also going to assign LFO 1 on a high BPM. We're going to assign that to the fine tune, left and right. And then this trick is obviously with the chaos. So automate the chorus pitch to the mod source chaos 1 and here as well, chaos 1. And then we're just going in the metrics, take down the rate a little bit because chaos 1 is very detuned as shown in the other tutorials. Open the rate of the chaos 1 in the global. Difference. This is really going to be our very broadly like. We could even get FM noise oscillator and make it a bit more. And just to have a little bit more going on, this detuned layer, let's just duplicate this and add it even one more time. And LFO 1, maybe have a lot of rate and just add it to the detune and see what happens. Sounds cool. And maybe to have a little bit different of a detune mode, this one here, we can change it right here, mode to super, see what happens. So it might fill the spectrum a little bit differently. I don't think it affects it too much, but you know, all the leads together are these right here. So what you want to do after that is just find the layer plugin, because I don't want the melody going in every single plugin like this. Just take the melody, add it to the layer right here, double click the layer so it's opened up, and just drag and drop over everything you want the layer to control, set children, and now this is going to play all of these together. Let's just get all of these in our mixer, but not before I add names. So found these, and then we're going to add this to our mixer. Select everything, channel routing, route to selected channels, and here we go. We have all these leads in here. Take down the volume first of all and get that into the mixer like this. Now we're going to change the color because I just really like to work with colors. This is going to be our lead synth. And in here, we're going to make it dark so it's easy to find. And there we go. So now we can have every individual lead. I could say 1, 2, 3, and 7 very much are uncharacterized leads. And you can see how it's important that you have more than one detune layer, because It's a huge difference just to have all these different types of leads in here. Always have this very uncharacterized, but then very detuned type of mega layer on top of your characterized leads, which is going to be these ones. I think this one, I can go back, and this is what you kind of want to do as well. You first make random leads or kind of with a direction, but you're not going to go like, oh, this needs to be different. It's just like, hey, this is a cool lead, let's include it. Then you hear that these two together, nice. Weird phasing. So what I want to do with this extra saw lead that we made, just gonna give it a little bit of detune. And it should result in a little bit less problems. For this lead, I also want a little bit more noise. And this one is cool. But I think it's too rough, so let's take band 12 maybe. So instead of using these detunes here, I'm going to use the detune that we have right here and put it in front of the distortion, because I want just a wider detune, because otherwise it remains to be a saw wave too much, and then it phases a little bit in a dirty way with the main lead we want. This one. Much better. And now we combine everything. And this is why it's important to have this one characterized lead, because here's the difference. And this one, you can hear that it removes the tightness of this whole sound, because you can hear that, right? It's very tight. And if you add this afterwards, it's going to have a little bit of artifacts. And that's because we have this detune in front of the distortion like this. So I could take down the rate, and I think it should be faster then. I guess that works, yeah. Maybe we band 24 again. And I'd like to add LFO 2 on a very fast rate to the fine tune again, because I don't think it's raw enough. Better. Cool. So as you can see, what I did here is just analyze the leads that we have and just think like, hey, why doesn't this work in terms of the whole context? And then you can see we have this very main detune layer without a lot of character, and then we have our main lead. That's kind of a character lead, and then a support lead that's just going to add clarity because it's not really detuned. And with this one, that's just also kind of a support character lead, I guess. So as you see, you kind of will have to use around 5 to 7 leads to create a full layer. And I'm kind of happy with this. So second thing that leaves us right here is the processing. So let's start with that. Always add the parametric EQ first. Make sure you select type high pass order 8, and we're going to completely cut the sub. As you see, this is nothing. If I select it just to showcase, you know, this is just trash and mud. It's not going to add anything. There you go. So now it's already a little bit cleaner. But you really need to make sure you don't cut too much, because otherwise you're really thinning out your leads. And I think a lot of people are doing this. They thin out their leads and it doesn't really work anymore. So this is a fine range. You do want quite some low mids. We can always remove them later, but the low mids kind of have a lot of body and character for your leads. And I see a lot of people just removing those because it's like, oh, they're muddy. No, they're very important. Then we want to get into the next thing, which for me is going to be compression. And Fruity Compressor is totally fine. It works, right? around -9 to 12. That is where we want to aim for, because you're going to want to pull everything to the threshold that's under it, and from the threshold above it to the threshold as well. So it's really going to pull the whole sound to -16 in this case, based on the ratio, the release, and attack. I think -12 will work. It's definitely hitting 15 and 12 all the time, but it's not really hitting anything above, so 12. Let's use a threshold of 12. Ratio, always around 4. Attack 15, release 200 is totally fine. I don't really tweak it too much. And as you can hear, it added the attack, and that's because it takes 15 milliseconds for the compression to hit and start pulling it to the threshold. So it takes 15 milliseconds where it can be its normal volume, and then it pulls back to 13, which, you know, generates this spike and also the tightness of the sound. You can always go like this, which is very extreme, and if you put it like this, you can also really hear that spike. And then it goes back. And it happens in miniature right here. Pretty compressor is fine, but if you really want a really good compressor for your leads, I highly recommend getting CLA 2A from Waves. It's just a crazy good compressor. I'm not trying to say spend more money, but this one is just insane. It really makes your leads come to life. So you don't really need to tweak much gain, peak reduction, as long as it's not clipping. And here's the difference. And you could argue that's because it just has more volume and a slightly different compressor. Fine. But I just don't want to screw around too much with these plugins, because they can work, but it just takes a little bit more time to make it sound really good. So for now, I'm sticking with CLA 2A, but you can definitely use free compressor and get a good effect as well. So the second plugin I want to really add in here is a dynamic EQ. I know there's free dynamic EQs out there. I have Pro Q3. You can get a free dynamic EQ anyways. What we're going to do with this one should get rid slightly of frequencies that are a little bit problematic. This is a little bit too much, but just slightly, it doesn't really matter. You could use a dynamic EQ like this. But you don't want to thin out the sound too much. And something you can do too is focus on the high end slightly, because you do want the leads to have a nice tight high end. But not like this. Like this. And let's add that in front of the compressor too. And I always like to double remove the bass. This is already a good point for our leads. And finally, I always like to add an inflator. You can also use a wave shaper. I keep saying this, but you know, off-sign mode is probably the same as Frank Paul in his video made with the patcher thingy. You can also download his inflator, but you know, inflator. But what I want to add here is this one, and just open up the effect slightly. And now we're also preventing this sound to go over 0 dB, but we got more power out of this thing. So this is kind of my basic setup for the leads, and I don't really tweak too much. And this is going to work in context. So there's nothing more to it actually. It's just literally an EQ with a bass cut, a compressor to glue it together. I use CLA 2A. We have a dynamic EQ to boost some frequencies where possible, make it crisp, and make sure it's kind of a flat curve where everything is slightly, like roughly the same volume. And then we're adding an inflator just to give a little bit more power and kind of, you know, get a very nice total sound, like kind of glue it together, I guess. It's all fake terms, I guess. But yeah, that's it. That's it. This is literally it. And I think a lot of people are very focused on getting certain, like I could listen to this thing here and then go like, I need to add, what do I need to add? Like, I don't think my lows are good enough and whatever. What you can literally do now is just introduce another lead. I don't want to duplicate this one. I'm going to duplicate this lead, the main one. Just going to add that right here, and we do an octave up. And add it to the layer right here as well. And just add it to the total thing. There you go. Just introduce some more leads if your computer handles it. Another one you can include is the harmony. And in another video, we can probably go over how you make harmonies. But for harmonies, I want to use a very like clear lead like this. A clear lead that doesn't really have much going on, but does pop out with the harmonies. So let's drag in the harmony as well. And now we add it there as well. And there you go. some final thoughts. I saw some comments about people not knowing what leads to choose to fill up certain spectrums. I think you shouldn't really focus on that too much and don't make it a surgical process. I think you should literally just kind of bombard your layer with more leads and more leads, as long as they have some sort of purpose. You know, just have a detuned layer, a little bit more detune, and then a higher detune, something that's hitting the high octaves, a main lead, and just cramp it together, put it through processing, and just make sure you have your bass cut and your compressors and your inflator. That's it. It's going to be a solid layer. That's what I'm trying to say. So in the next video, I'm going to add the chords and we're going to get the total processing. And in the other one, we're going to add it to a kick as well and might finish the song, you know? So thanks for watching. Go download our freebies with the link below. And I really hope you enjoyed this. If you have any questions, drop them right now because we're going to see if we can use them in the next video. So see you in the next one. Bye.